right, let's talk about some of the traps. The first one that is a trap that we want to avoid that I think is the most common is that we need to resist the urge to act like someone else. We need to be ourselves. And I think it takes a long time for us to come into our own professionally and figure out what that looks like. But I know among my friends in business and women who don't consider themselves professional saleswomen, but maybe business owners, the most common thing that I hear is them say, I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be pushy. Okay, now I would ask you, do we think that we're pushy when we're helping anyone else with anything else? Of course not. In other relationships, we think it's about a transaction. It's about interaction. But when it comes to sales, we think maybe there's only one way to sell and there's one way to do this. And if I do this the way I think I'm supposed to, then they're not going to receive me well. Well, I would urge you to think of a different way of doing it then, right? If there's something that you have been trained to do in the past professionally that makes you uncomfortable, then don't do it. Don't do it. Okay? There are sales methods, and I have opinions, and I think some are better than others. But they're not all right for everyone. So it's okay to say, I'm not comfortable with this way I have been taught to negotiate. I'm not comfortable with that. I need to get advice and help, and I need to find a different way to do that. That is an okay thing to do. Let's also remember the definition of sales that was mentioned earlier. True sales is about solving a customer's problem. It's about helping someone. So when we keep that in the forefront of our mind, we can be sincere and be ourselves and be more comfortable. The next trap is acting like you don't want the business. Okay, now, speaking to a group of business owners, so at first blush, this may sound crazy. Of course you want the business. However, we all, at various times, have done things to undermine ourselves where we act like we don't really want the business. Right? If you've been in a conversation with someone before and you're thinking, we're not clicking, do you not want to sell to me? Or is it that you're not really confident in your own product? You can't, there's just something not going right. And I think that we do that to ourselves, especially when we feel that we have to hold back or that somehow it's more professional to act unenthusiastic. Right? It's okay to act like you want the business. Again, people like buying from people that they like. So I think as a woman in sales, we have an advantage by being ourselves and being warm and being real. Again, remembering that it has to be good for both of us. If the transaction is good for both of us, then it's a win-win. Some common mistakes in this acting like you don't want the business, what that breaks down to look like is that we might not show confidence in our selling, we may be not enthusiastic enough about our product or service, or we may be in the middle of the sales process and we may leave things too open-ended where the customer is not sure what they're supposed to do next to indicate an interest. So let's look at a couple specific examples of what not to do. These are real emails that have come from a friend of mine in business. The first one, I've added you to our email list. Please feel free to unsubscribe at any time, and hopefully it won't become burdensome. Okay, what does that sound like?
An apology.
An apology, someone said, right. This instills doubt in the mind of the reader, and the seller is lacking confidence. So we don't know, is it burdensome because of the frequency of the emails? Is it burdensome because someone has told them their content is not very meaningful? We don't know exactly why, but this is not confident, right? This is a real life example. We don't want to do this, okay? Second example. Does it make sense to schedule a call in a couple of months to see if and how things have changed? Perhaps in May? Question mark. Perhaps in May. What's wrong with this? Well, speaking about what we looked at earlier, this email is quite open-ended, right? So it's leaving a lot of responsibility to the buyer. So the buyer has to really put themselves out there and say, yes, I want you to call me on May 5th, even though this might be 3 months from the time they're sending the email. We don't know for sure, right? A little open-ended. Maybe a better way to say it would be, I understand you have another budgetary priority that you've shared with me with your blah, blah, blah. Therefore, I will call you the first week of May. I will call you when you return from the conference. I enjoyed speaking with you. That would be a better way to say that. Let's look at 2 more examples. These are my favorite. Again, in inside sales, we end up calling excuse me, a lot of people that we don't know on behalf of our clients. And there is a method of selling that I like that's called solution selling that talks about the idea of having sales power. Okay? I was taught that you have power as a salesperson if you like the product or service that you sell. And what we do when we make little slip-ups that are actually very easy to correct, what we do is we accidentally give away our power. So let's talk about some examples of how we might be doing that. For example, in introducing yourself, it can be a mistake to use someone's title if we refer to ourselves by our first name. So that would look like, hi, Mr. Jones, this is Catherine Brown from Initial Call. Okay? What I've done in this case is I've referred to him by his title because he's perhaps a very high C-level title, CFO, CIO, CEO, but I'm a business owner too, right? Very often, this is a challenge when women sell to men also. And many of my sales managers are women, and they're often calling on men. So if that is the case in your industry, I would ask you to think about your default position. All right, there are industry specifics where it may not be appropriate. If I were calling Warren Buffett, I would not call him Warren, okay, because there is a power difference that is just true in the universe in that example. Okay, but under most cases, I would use a man's first name. The principle behind that, again, is that peers buy from peers, and power buys from power. So we might be meaning to be respectful, but really what we've done is we've given away our power. Okay? Second example is leaving a conversation. The context is leaving a conversation or scheduling a next step. A common error in sales is to say, thank you for your time. Okay, this is my big beef. So you are free to disagree with me and we can have discussions afterwards. But again, in most cases, I think this is gratuitous. And while you're trying to express enthusiasm about getting together, I think what you've done is you have implied that your time is less precious than his or hers, right? So there are other ways that you can say this, right? Such as, it was a pleasure to talk with you, okay? But your time is still precious in that example. Or, I'm looking forward to talking with you again. Or, thank you for lunch. Or whatever it was. It's not to be impolite, but I specifically think that as a default position, that's a filler that we've learned somewhere along the way. We just say, thank you for your time. And I think that it takes away our power. I think it's unnecessary. Let's look in summary at some things we want to remember. Okay. Women are good at building relationships and maintaining them. We can leverage our own network as well as the network of our friends with their permission. Think about if you could be doing that better. Women are good at reading nonverbal communication and picking up hints. And remember, many people set out to buy something and they don't actually know what they want. So you have an opportunity to read all those signals and be a help. It's important to be yourself. If the way that you have been taught to sell makes you uncomfortable, please email me and ask me, and I will recommend a slew. Tell me specifically what makes you uncomfortable, and I will recommend methods and books and suggestions, or spend some time with you helping you think about what would make you more comfortable, because you have products and services that you should be proud of, and you don't need to sell in a way that makes you uncomfortable, because that's hurting you. And finally, it is okay to act like you want the business. Okay, it's okay to do that. And so examine yourself and examine the examples of the way you speak to think about whether you may be accidentally giving away your power. Finally, I have just a resources page of a couple of the sources that I used, that I referenced today, and would be happy to talk with you more about those.